They called the planet E95R, but to the Galactic Accord. It was better known as Tomb World Theta. The place was cursed with ancient radiation. Dust storms that could shear steel, and temperatures that swung from molten days to ice-coated nights. No water, no oxygen, no native life. It was a planet long ago declared beyond reclamation, a dead world, which made it perfect for humanity's exile. The Accord's official ruling was humane displacement. Earth, still recovering from centuries of civil unrest and environmental collapse, had grown restless and innovative in ways the galaxy didn't approve of. Genetic manipulation, rogue terraforming, and, worst of all, the development of unregulated AI ecosystems. When diplomatic warnings failed and sanctions only fueled Earth's progress, the Council made a decision: remove the problem. Species. Without bloodshed, of course, this was a civilized galaxy, after all. So they offered Earth's remaining scientists and thinkers a pioneering opportunity, a fresh start. Passage to a new world where their ingenuity could flourish. It was a lie. They were herded into ancient colony, ships barely space-worthy hulks from a more desperate time. One such ship, Hope's Folly, carried over 2,000 human exiles. Engineers, biodesigners, and researchers, no weapons, raw military, just minds. Minds the Accord thought too dangerous to be left free. Dr. Mira Elson stood near the bridge window of Hope's Folly, her white hair tied back in a loose braid, eyes narrowed as she stared at the world below. Red, lifeless, silent, even from orbit, the air shimmered with radiation. Craters marked ancient meteor scars. There was no trace of green, no shimmer of water around her. The ship's crew sat in silence, most of them too numb or frightened to speak. "So this is the end?" one young man asked bitterly. "This is what we get for thinking differently." Myra didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the data readings coming from the planet's surface: toxic, bone-dry, temperatures above 70 degrees Celsius at midday, atmospheric pressure just enough to pop ears. But there were traces trapped ice beneath the crust, minerals laced. With silicates, heavy metals the galaxy had long stopped mining. "No," she finally said. "This is the beginning." Others looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. Myra didn't blame them. She had been a controversial figure even back on Earth, a pioneer in bioresurrection theory, teaching that even the deadest ecosystems could be sparked back into life with the right microbial architecture. She'd been laughed out of conferences, mocked in policy debates. But now? Now, she had her lab, her people, and a planet no one wanted. As Hope's Folly descended, the ship creaked and groaned. There were no automated landing beacons here, no welcome protocols. The descent was blind and perilous, relying on decades-old nav software. Still, they made it. The impact shattered one of the forward stabilizers. A third of the outer solar panels were damaged. Supplies were limited. Air recycling would last maybe 6 months. They had no backup, and yet the humans moved in the first week. They erected 6 survival domes, connecting them with pressurized tunnels. Old solar batteries were scavenged and repurposed. Heating units were cobbled together from salvage. The team began rationing immediately, eating protein paste and algae pellets in silence. It was bleak. Spirits were low. But Myra wasn't focused on the now, she was focused on below. She led the first surface dig herself. Half a kilometer down, her team found what she had suspected: fractured ice deposits trapped beneath layers of basalt, buried in the crust. The ancient signs of moisture. Then came the real breakthrough: spore capsules, biological time bombs, developed back on Earth, designed to transform barren substrates into usable soil. They'd been smuggled aboard in secret by Mira's team against orders. And now they were all that stood between survival and slow extinction. Carefully, she released the first capsule into the ground, near a geothermal vent. Millions of engineered microbes swarmed into the rock, hungry and blind, born to reshape death into life. This planet was a grave, Myra told her team, But graves are where we bury seeds, too. There was silence, then a few nods, then a purpose. The humans had been sent to die on a lifeless planet. But death, they had learned long ago, is just the first step in transformation and humanity. It never stops growing. End of part 1. In the wake of their arrival on E95R, the survivors of Hope's Folly faced a cruel, grinding reality. The sky was a rust-colored blur, filled with fine ash that turned filters black in days. The solar panels yielded only partial power beneath. The thick clouds. Every breath taken outside the survival domes had to be filtered 3 times and could only be sustained for minutes at a time. Food was rationed down to exact calories and morale teetered on the edge of collapse. Yet beneath, the surface, something extraordinary had begun. Dr. Mira Elson and her small team of bioengineers worked without rest. Using scanners and deep-core drills, they identified geothermal pockets where the temperature remained stable warm enough for microbial life. Into these crevices, they injected Earth's most daring experiment, seed strain, Alpha-3, a microscopic ecosystem designed to decompose alien minerals and synthesize usable nutrients. The scientists didn't sleep much. Most didn't speak unless necessary. But slowly, the sterile ground began to change. First came the fungal mat sickly. Bioluminescent sheets of engineered mycelium that crawled over rocks like mold. They looked wrong, alien, but they worked, consuming toxic metal and leaving behind rich, spongy biomass. Mira called them pioneers. Then came the moss. It sprouted in the crevices of the test fields, faint green veins in the crimson dust. It was thick, coarse, and completely inedible. But it was alive. When the first real photosynthesis readings came back, the entire colony gathered in Dome 3. The screen showed it plainly. Atmospheric CO down by 1.6%. Oxygen levels up by 0.4%. Minuscule. Meaningless to most. But not to Mira. She stood before them, dusty, tired but smiling. "We've given the planet its first breath," she said. "Now let's give it lungs." Her optimism was a lifeline. People began volunteering for soil tests, fungal mapping, and construction in dangerous zones. Children, some born during the voyage, drew green trees on dome walls, though they'd never seen one. Artists carved designs into growing fungus. Stalks. Old engineers repurposed waste tanks into hydrothermal greenhouses. They named the first plantable zone Narration Basin. Myra oversaw the project herself. Layers of fungus-rich loam were spread over the modified soil, protected by heat-retaining biofilm. Then came the seeds, carefully chosen hybrids that could survive high UV, salty water, and acidic pH levels. At first, everything died. A second attempt. This time, irrigation lines delivered carefully warmed water filtered through stone and microbial mesh. The plant struggled. A third try. And then, finally, success. The first stalk of Terran wheat pierced the crust and unfurled toward the sky. It was stunted, twisted, nearly gray in color, but it was a miracle. Others followed. Then tubers, herbs, even legumes. Within months, Narration Basin was a patchwork of strange, hardy crops. The transformation was grueling, but unstoppable. Every crop failure taught them something new. The soil, once inert, now crawled with carefully tuned microecologies. Air inside the domes became cleaner. Filters lasted longer. Domes stayed warmer at night. And for the first time, humans ate something grown from the world beneath their feet. They wept as they bit into it. Still, the outside world was far from safe. Dust storms still roared, tearing through external facilities. Equipment corroded faster than expected. Radiation surges from the sun forced scheduled underground shelter hours. They lost friends to accidents and sickness, but the rhythm of life had begun. As months turned to years, the domes were expanded. Pipes were replaced with vines engineered to carry water. Root structures grew into the supports of the habitat. The old metal frames were eventually dismantled and replaced with living architecture, biofused walls of bark. Filtered membranes. For light, oxygen-excreting moss ceilings, The planet had not welcomed them, but it hadn't stopped them either, and that was enough. Eventually, Mira stood once again before the people, now older, her skin deeply wrinkled. Lost none of its fire. 5 years ago, we were sentenced to death, she said. They gave us a tomb. But we are not bones to be buried. We are seeds. And this is our sprouting. The crowd stood in silence, then broke into cheers. Round them, vines curled gently over lights, fruit dangled in the open, and the sky, though still tinged red, was less angry now, calmer in the galaxy beyond. No one cared yet. Thought humanity was gone, just as planned. No one had looked twice at E95R in decades, but something was growing. And soon the galaxy would smell it. Blooming. End of Part 2. 5 years had passed since the exiles of Hope's Folly first set foot on the tomb world, now known as E95R, but it was no longer a barren rock or forgotten grave. The humans had renamed it Verdantia, name whispered with reverence by the settlers and with confusion by the rest of the galaxy. Verdantia had transformed beyond all expectation. Where once there had been only red dust and radiation storms, now there were green valleys, dome-grown forests, and freshwater lakes fed by thawed subterranean ice. The air, once poisonous, now carried the scent of chlorophyll and mist, microbial. Clouds released faint ozone, reducing radiation and stabilizing climate patterns. Verdantia was no longer just survivable. It was beginning to thrive. But back in the Galactic Accord, no one noticed, not yet. The Accord's attention finally snapped toward Verdantia when the first exports left orbit. The starship Greenwake, built from salvaged wrecks and biosteel grown from local roots, emerged from hyperspace in a fringe sector of Accord-controlled space. Its cargo, not weapons, not refugees, but soil. Soil so nutrient-rich that it made traditional hydroponic yields look like famine rations. Verdantia's exports didn't stop there. They sent seed pods, engineered to adapt to almost any planetary condition. Medicinal herbs, tailored to alien biologies. Fungal antibiotics with nanite-level precision. Even fruit flavorful, dense with nutrients. And unlike anything the galaxy had tasted in centuries, to a civilization that had long depended on synthetic nutrition and sterile hydrogel packs. It was like tasting fire for the first time, and that terrified people. The powerful Agral combine. The largest food and pharmaceutical conglomerate in the galaxy viewed the news from Verdantia with growing concern. They controlled most of the Accord's synthetic food markets and couldn't afford competition, especially not from humans, especially not from exiles. When their profits began to dip, they sent spies. When that failed, they lobbied the council. Unregulated biotics, they argued, unstable genogrowth, contamination risks. They branded Verdantia a biological rogue state. Even as half their own science board placed secret orders for Verdantian strains. Still, Verdantia remained peaceful, open. They welcomed visitors, scientists, refugees from other exile colonies. Even a few non-human species settled in the green corridors of the once-dead world. Among them was Enki, a Thalari environmentalist whose people had abandoned terraforming centuries ago. Enki had never seen a real forest. On Verdantia, he wept beneath a breathing canopy of translucent leaves and sent a single message home: the humans have done the impossible. Life has returned to death. The message leaked, and that's when the council sent an envoy. They arrived expecting a disorganized hovel of genetic extremists. What they found instead stunned them. Structured ecosystems. Clean architecture grown from living roots, cities, powered by wind and algae light. Children of multiple species playing in sun-filtered gardens. At the heart of it all, they met Dr. Mira Elson, older now, but still sharp, still radiant with calm intensity. They questioned her. She welcomed them with tea brewed from flowering moss and handed them soil samples more valuable than antimatter. One Accord ambassador, clearly shaken, asked, "Why do this? You were sent here to fade, to disappear." Mira answered simply, "Because you forgot what we are. You feared our minds. But we're more dangerous when we care. When we create. You gave us a tomb. You made it a womb. The envoy returned to the council, and the galaxy began to murmur. Some praised Verdantia, others mocked it. The Agrel Combine launched a smear campaign, branding the humans eco-fanatics, dangerous utopians. But they couldn't stop. The seeds from spreading, Verdantian microbes had already leaked into trade routes. Seeds had taken root on space stations. Entire domes on other fringe worlds had turned green overnight. And then came the whispers from other tomb worlds once dead. Planets where exiles had also been sent. Ships from Verdantia had quietly landed there over the years. And now, strange things were happening. Moss on walls, mushrooms in old bunkers, clean air in rotting domes. Verdantia hadn't just saved itself. It was awakening the forgotten. And the Accord realized far too late that this wasn't just survival. It was rebellion. One planted root at a time. End of part 3. The world had never seen a war quite like it. No battle lines. No fleets of dreadnoughts clashing in orbit. No plasma barrages or weaponized moons. The green. Wars didn't begin with gunfire. They began with seeds. By the 7th year of Verdantia's existence, over 24 dead or dying planets had begun to change. A strange, subtle contagion of life. Fungal webs in the ruins of prison colonies. Algae growing inside the ducts of forgotten orbital stations. Microbial terraforming kits shipped, discreetly across borders and unpacked in the shadows. The councils still didn't fully understand it. But they knew one thing for certain. This Verdantian expansion was undermining galactic balance. The Agrel Combine, now desperate, declared Verdantia a threat to food security. Their lobbyists roared in the Galactic Senate. Bioinstability, cultural contamination, Terran aggression through biological proliferation. But what truly frightened them was that Verdantia wasn't taking territory it was. Changing it, planets long considered economic dead weight were suddenly blooming. Trade hubs abandoned for a generation came back online, powered by sustainable, regenerative tech that didn't require corporate oversight. Alien species that had lived under food rationing for centuries were tasting real fruit again. Local. Governors stopped ordering food shipments from the Combine and started trading for Verdantian kits instead. The Combine responded the only way corporations knew how. They launched drones. The first strike hit a newly constructed hydro dam on Verdantia's northern ridge. It exploded during planting season, unleashing a flood that drowned 6 fields and 23 people. The second was subtler, a bioagent introduced into imported soil. The black rot, they called it. Entire fungal beds collapsed overnight. Crops twisted and died. It took Mira Elson and her scientists weeks to isolate the engineered infection and reprogram. Microbial countermeasures, they didn't strike back. Instead, they grew faster. When the Combine attacked, again targeting Verdantian seed ships, en route to the rim, the humans responded by going underground. Literally, their seed couriers shifted to encrypted communication, cloaked flight paths, and biological encryption, living codes hidden within DNA sequences. Verdantia wasn't a single planet anymore. It had become a network. Beneath the surface of every reclaimed world, genetically linked microbial colonies began to communicate. Through chemical signals, mineral shifts, and subtle atmospheric tweaks, they shared debtor-resistant strategies. Crop improvements, water sources. They were no longer just farming. They were building ecosystems that learned. Back on Verdantia, Dr. Mira Elson convened the first council of the route. Delegates arrived from over 30 worlds, former prisoners, exiles, alien biologists even. A few rogue Accord members sympathetic to the cause. No one brought weapons. They brought samples, soil, seeds, roots, spores. We won't fight their war, Mira told them, standing beneath a canopy of living glass and vines, because we've already won the one that matters. We proved that life can return, that forgotten places are not lost. They will try to burn it down. Yes, but fire spreads too. So does green. The Combine grew more desperate. They launched a full embargo. Ships carrying Verdantian supplies were declared contraband. Markets closed. Travel was restricted. Entire systems were threatened with trade sanctions if they accepted anything labeled Terran grown. But it was already too late. Verdantian plants had taken root in every quadrant. Their microbial tech had been replicated by fringe scientists. Even Accord scientists, once silent, began experimenting with the soil. Pirate broadcasters played looped videos of flowering cities where once stood broken ruins. One message echoed across every channel: you cannot kill what has already taken root. The final act came not from Verdantia, but from a planet once listed as Class 0. Darnax II, the site of a failed Accord terraforming experiment. Declared uninhabitable, its entire surface had been glassed by radiation. But when investigators arrived to dismantle a suspected Verdantian outpost, they found something unbelievable. A valley green, humid, teeming with life, trees over 30 meters tall, bioengineered beasts grazing peacefully, a freshwater lake, birds, frogs, air, clean, breathable air, and in the center stood a child, human, no more than 7. Born on Darnax, playing with an insect made of polished bark. The captain of the enforcement squad lowered his rifle. "How long?" he asked quietly. 3 years, one of the scientists answered. No bombs had fallen, no invasions launched, and yet the Accord had lost control. It's not to war but to life. The Green Wars weren't a rebellion. They were a reclamation. No one knows who coined the phrase "the day the galaxy bloomed." But everyone remembered where they were when it happened. It wasn't marked by explosions or declarations. It wasn't a coup or a revolution. It came quietly like a creeping, vine-splitting stone slow patient. Inevitable, it began on a council-controlled world called Velen Prime, a frigid, industrial planet, once praised for its efficiency but cursed with a sterile, soulless existence. Entire generations had grown up eating nutrient paste in gray towers under carbon skies. Then one day, a strange green sprout broke through the pavement in the central plaza. No one knew how it had gotten there. Security footage revealed nothing. It wasn't part of the local ecosystem. It didn't match any known Accord-approved flora. And yet within a week, it had grown into a blooming bush, purple, fragrant, resilient. The people came to see it, to smell it. Children reached out to touch something their ancestors hadn't felt in generations. Life, born from soil. They didn't tear it out. They fenced it off like a treasure. The council ordered its removal. The people refused. That same week, reports arrived from across the galaxy green cracks, appearing in gray cities. Moss curling beneath floorboards, leaves unfurling from rusted antennas. Crops growing in the shadow of bombed-out colonies. Verdantian life was emerging everywhere in places never touched by a seed ship, in worlds considered lost to entropy. It wasn't just that the exiles had terraformed their own planet. It was that they had taught the galaxy how to heal. Back on Verdantia, Dr. Mira Elson sat in her living chair, made from the heartwood of the first tree she had ever grown on the planet. She was frail now, her hands thin and weathered like leaves near autumn. Yet her eyes sparkled with the same quiet fire they'd carried since Hope's Folly first fell through the red sky of E95R. She watched as a new generation ran through the tall grass. Human, Thalari, Uric, even 2 Alari children born from artificial wombs. They were chasing insects Myra couldn't even name, creatures that hadn't existed 5 years ago. Life had adapted. It had made its home here. Just like humanity. An assistant entered quietly. "Dr. Elson, the Accord just issued a new policy draft. They're formally recognizing Verdantia as an autonomous ecological sovereign." Mira chuckled. "Softly, they've finally learned you can't legislate against roots. They want you to attend a summit," the assistant said. "To speak about ... reconciliation." Mira looked to the sky. It was blue to day pale, but true. A few clouds rolled gently overhead, real clouds formed from real weather. It was a far cry from the radiation storms of those early years. "Tell them," she said after a pause, "to send a gardener." What followed in the years after was not conquest, not surrender, but something new. Co-growth. Verdantian science spread like spores through the stars. The old combine monopoly collapsed, unable to compete with the living. Ecosystems springing up across the rim. Accord planets began dismantling their sterile food factories, planting again, reclaiming deserts, jungles, and even oceans. And in time, they stopped calling it the Green Wars. They called it the Verdant Era. Planets once classified as death worlds were relisted. Tomb worlds were now seed worlds. Kyre's cities were built atop living root systems. Architects became biologists. Children studied not military history, but ecosystem stewardship. Warships were repurposed into floating forests, and the idea that had once condemned humanity, the belief that dead things could bloom again, was now the foundation of galactic recovery. When Myra Elson finally passed, it was not in silence. Every leaf on Verdantia curled gently inward in mourning. Microbial network pulsed low for hours. All over the galaxy, flowers bloomed in her image, genetically encoded to mimic her favorite species, the Earth daffodil. Seeded from orbital carriers and pollen drones, they sprouted across 10,000 worlds. Her gravestone was placed at the center of the first forest. No marble, no digital light, just a small tree, strong and tall. Carved into its bark were the words, "They gave us a tomb. We gave them a garden." It wasn't long before the galaxy learned something Mira had always known. You can burn a city. You can erase a name. You can even silence a people. But you cannot stop a seed once it takes root, and humanity had planted billions. End of part 5.